today in this video, I am having a conversation with one of the rising stars of the alternative media in Australia, Dave Pellowe, who is the host of Pellowe Talk. And he was kind enough to send me one of his official pieces of memorabilia, his mug. So, Dave, I'm going to use this today. I've just become more prestigious doing that.
Brendan, I can see the intelligence and the attractiveness increasing with every sip.
That's right. Now, I'm tempted to call this this little video segment "Across the Ditch" because, as I said, Dave's sitting across the other side of the ditch in Australia. I'm in New Zealand. Australia and New Zealand generally have quite a keen rivalry. But every now and then we see eye to eye on a few things. And for those who are wondering, that's why you're going to hear crows in the background today, because it's not because Dave is some sort of weird, evil, maniacal, conservative sorcerer who's sitting in some dungeon somewhere with a group of evil entities and animals all around him. It's literally just crows in the background in Australia outside. Is that right, Dave?
That's right. It's a beautiful, balmy 28 degrees Celsius here in South Brisbane this morning, just north of the Gold Coast. So, yeah, I don't know about you, but Queensland, beautiful one day. Perfect.
Well, mate, that's excellent. Tourism Australia will be sending you a check in the mail for that little plug. Let's dive straight into it in this video, and I'm hoping that we can do this regularly, Dave.
Yeah.
If the audience like it, I think it'd be great. We're just going to talk about some of the stuff that's making news headlines in the last wee while. First and foremost, let's dive straight in. The Russian, Syrian, Trump airstrikes, the Syrian airstrikes, basically.
Yep.
It's happened. I made a video last week saying I don't think that the US should be involved in Syria under the current circumstances. What are your thoughts?
Look, there's a whole heap of different ways to skin the cat, and it depends on your political philosophy all over. If you're a neoconservative, then you believe that for the sake of our own national security, we should be involved in other theatres. We should make sure terrorists aren't being greenhoused in Iran and Pakistan and Syria and those places where they commonly are being trained. You think we should leave our home, send our troops over, and put an end to the threat that is being nurtured abroad. If you're a non-interventionist, and this is how Trump sold himself, he said, why are we there? What's it ever gained us? What help is it doing? If it's not good for us, essentially he said, whiff 'em. What's in it for me? If there's nothing in it for America, why are we doing it? Now, there's a huge number of people dead from Syria. I think it's something like 250,000 have died from the Syrian war so far, and it's nearly over. There's absolutely nothing to be gained by America intervening at the moment. And it doesn't even make sense why, what they're saying has happened. There's a couple of background contexts where everybody should be sitting back, cooling their heels, and withholding judgment right now. Certainly not engaging in airstrikes.
Yeah, and that's my point, right? Is that there are things that there's too much we don't know.
Exactly.
A couple of years ago, Errol Morris, the documentarian, made a great documentary with Rumsfeld. I think it was called Unknown Unknowns, and it's this interesting documentary. He's just sitting there talking to a camera and trying to justify the whole Iraq war. And Rumsfeld talks about the things you can know, the things you don't know, and the things you don't know that you don't know you don't know. And it seems to me there's just too many of those to have justified this particular airstrike in this case.
Well, even just have a look. On one hand, you've got the Iraq War, where the international intelligence community was absolutely certain, beyond all reasonable doubt, that Saddam Hussein definitely had stockpiles of weapons of mass destruction as well as chemical weapons. After the war, dust had settled, piling heap of burning rubble. You send in all the UN investigators and all the independent people, and nobody can find a single piece of evidence that such a stockpile ever existed, let alone was reasonably used as justification for the war. And it's well known, accepted fact now that everybody's gone, mea culpa, my bad, whoops. We just declared war on a sovereign nation without any justification. Now, that was absolutely certain. Now, I like Trump, so to declare my bias, I'm probably wanting to give him the benefit of the doubt as well as Mad Dog Mattis. But, General Mattis came out and said, we're really, really confident. which is political speak short of absolutely certain, which means we absolutely have no idea. We've got a sneaking suspicion, but we're really, really confident that that's just not enough.
Here's the thing. I think that there have been some people who have been saying, well, I think this is some amazing 4D chess here. And it seems to me this is now the go-to excuse for anything that Trump does that really probably should be questioned by his diehard supporters. They just say, no, trust him. He knows what he's doing. He's just such a great strategist. I'm not convinced. And I think I see here, there is, as I said, this, and you've highlighted it, there's just too many questions. And we should be critiquing and asking those questions, not simply saying, this is a clever game of 4D chess. And some people I've said are suggesting that what he's done is he's appealed to the sort of the neocon warmongers within the movement and within the establishment. And so he's done this small, non-risky thing to get them off his back. And if that is the case, to me, that seems crazy. That seems absolutely crazy. That's not why, or the justification for launching military strikes, anyway.
Yeah, look, I think this isn't 4D chess. I think this is the opposite. I think this is really, really transparently simple. And that is the neocons heard, a month ago, was it? A month or two ago, Trump, announced his foreign policy via Twitter, as he famously does, and said, it's time to get out of Syria. They panicked. And this whole thing has been staged and faked, or at the very least exaggerated and, no pun intended, trumped up. And so this surgical strike, which strategically does absolutely nothing to anybody, it doesn't change the chessboard at all. What it is it's a political virtue signal. Is that, okay, I'm going to strike against injustice overseas because we're the exceptional nation in the world. Okay. He hasn't really done anything significant to change the chessboard, if you want to call the war in Syria against internal terrorism from foreign invaders a chessboard, then okay. But really, Assad was on the verge of victory. And this would have been the single best way to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Assad's a foreign-educated, very, very secular, Arab nation, and heading more and more that way. You hear his wife talk. He's not that stereotypical Arab dictator with a rainbow of self-awarded decorations on his military uniform chest. He wears a suit. He's a businessman. He's a professional. He's intelligent and educated. His wife's got a British accent. She's so Western. He's not that dumb. A year ago, there was a chemical gas attack, which probably wasn't him, and probably wasn't even a gas attack, because everybody that was on the scene was totally fine, not using any kind of protection whatsoever. The surgeons weren't treating the patients with, personal protective equipment and, hazmat uniforms and things. Everybody was unprotected. It was totally faked. The Syrian Observatory, which is one man in a flat in London, was the source of intel for that as well as for this. The white helmets, which are backed by Soros, are meant to, they've been so delegitimized and
see this is my point. This is my point here is I don't think I'm willing to entertain the possibility that Assad is really that mad and evil. I mean, and by the way, we should say
he's a bad guy.
And we should say here, neither of us are trying to say Assad is the perfect pinnacle of what leadership should be. Not by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
However, it is possible that he is that insane that he thought I could pull off this Machiavellian move and gas my own people and get away with it. It seems absolutely crazy though, and the big thing for me is, where's the proof? That's what we need. It's not simply enough to say, oh, no, you've got to trust us. We've got evidence. It seems to me, even the UK, so Theresa May, it seems to me, is compromised on this because of what the Russians did on their soil with that recent poisoning and of that ex-Russian agent on British soil. And she actually even mentioned that in her speech about the Syrian bombing. Yeah. And she talked about this, not allowing chemical weapons anywhere, including on the streets of the UK. And it's like, hold on, is this actually about Syria or is this about Russia? And I can't help but sense that for some of these nations,
either.
Well, see, for me, I can't help but sense that some of this is actually about a political response more to Russia than perhaps even to Syria. It's like we'll flex our muscle. Trump's trying to prove to his home base that he's not a puppet of Vladimir Putin. All these kind of things,
Yeah, look, I've heard some commentators say there's no way this is Trump just trying to distract from his domestic agenda. Well, I'm like, well, hang on. They're justifying that based on the fact that France and Britain jumped on board as well, and therefore the intelligence must be overwhelming. But look, it was one piece of now discredited intelligence that got the entire international, community onto the Iraq train. So why do they suddenly have credibility to think independently? It's always been groupthink, follow America's lead. So why would this occasion be any different?
Well, I think this is where Mattis is interesting to me. I think Mattis seems to be hedging his bets a little bit. So a couple of weeks ago, he gave that he's referred to in that document where he talked about, I think it was Newsweek that gave coverage of it, where he talks about the fact that we don't really know for certain who conducted the last chemical weapons attack
12 months ago.
Yeah, that's right. And so he's saying, well, we don't really know for certain. Even here in this, he was just a day before the missile strikes are launched. He's saying things that seem to be slightly different to what Trump's saying. It still seems to me that Mattis is this guy who's in this role where he feels that military sort of hierarchical obligation to the president, but at the same time doesn't quite buy into all of the neocon rhetoric either about wars and remaking Syria in their own image,
There's not enough reference to the fact. In fact, I haven't heard it anywhere in the mainstream media, but there was another alleged gas attack in Syria a month ago, several weeks, 5 or 6 weeks ago, and it was categorically recognized as fake. I don't know how on the back of the fake attack a year ago, the fake attack a month ago, they all of a sudden think, oh, now Assad's doing this, and he suddenly thinks it's there's actually track record that it's not Assad. There's no logical reason why it would be. I don't think it is possible. Maybe in the realms of mathematical statistics, it measures above zero, but it's not probable that Assad is that maniacal or that Machiavellian that he's so stupid as to invite foreign intervention into a war he's just about won.
Yeah,
he's not unpopular in Syria. He's not unpopular. I've got a friend, a guest, and a close friend who I have coffee with, and he's Syrian-born Aussie. And he has his father and hundreds of cousins in Syria on the ground spread around. And there's two things that I can report directly from those sources. One, Assad is not unpopular, not hated, not a loathed, benevolent dictator. People like him over there. Not everybody, just the same as any democratic country. Nobody has a total popularity, but he's very popular. And the more the West attacks Syria, the more popular he gets. The second thing is the people in Duma where this alleged gas attack happened a week ago, there's people who live there, and it's not a big area. There's people there who know nothing about it. And it's like, well, was there a gas attack? And if there was, how on earth can you know at this early stage who it definitely was, given so many negative, bad actors in that scene have the ability to do exactly that have done recently.
And that's my thing. I think there are too many murky, clouded potential alternative interests in this part of the world. Then there are so many different motivations that could have, and even if they all just come together in one big perfect storm, I got one person over here who's got this motivation, would benefit from it. Another group over here have got this motivation. And you add all these things together, there's a whole lot of them. You realize how easily you could end up doing this kind of thing. And if you've got a president who is renowned before he even became president for being the guy who made himself look smart by surrounding himself with smarter people and then following their advice and then taking credit for it, then it's not unsurprising that he would do the same thing as president. He goes, well, I don't know enough about this, and these guys are telling me it's legit, so I should do it.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. The other, you're talking about motives. Assad has every motive in any reasonable military strategist mind to not upset the apple cart and invite the international community in right now. But who does? Who would benefit from this attack?
Yeah, that's right.
And it's the people who are losing. Yeah. It's ISIS. And so the most probable outcome of this intervention is that if it was military successful, which it wasn't, and this is where it's probably okay what Trump has done, is he's done this virtue signal that hasn't changed much strategically. But ISIS are hoping he does change much strategically, that he takes out significant targets and they can have some kind of military resurgence from the brink of defeat. Whereas Assad, it's completely opposite. All he really has to do now is just bide his time, their history.
And that's why I was talking about Mattis before, is because I read comments from Mattis where he was talking about they had to be surgical because they didn't want to do that very thing. So clearly he seems to understand the danger here, even if others don't.
Yep.
A couple of things just to perhaps wrap this up. There's a couple of things that strike me as problematic here. Number one is the whole idea of, well, let's just make ourselves world police and start firing missiles into foreign countries anytime something bad happens. Now, yes, if chemical weapons have been used by the Syrian regime, that is a very serious violation of all sorts of things, from ethical standards to international prohibitions, right?
Yep.
However, does that mean that the first and primary resort or retort to that should be a military action firing missiles into a country? Like, imagine what would happen if Syria fired missiles at Washington because of something that Washington did, let's say Waco, Texas. So someone's commented on my post the other day about this. Imagine if they started firing missiles because they said what you did to your own people at Ruby Ridge or Waco, Texas was awful. And it was awful. We would say, hold on a minute, that's not how you deal with that situation. You're not helping. It seems to me that is, I just question why that is the default response and why they think they have to be the world police.
Yeah, look, my bottom position on interventionism is mind your own business. They're a sovereign nation. And unless the United Nations and all the nations of the world deem that it's necessary to intervene to prevent a genocide, such as is likely to happen in South Africa or is already happening in North Korea and has been for generations, then unless there's a global consensus about that, then acting unilaterally, even with a small number of allied vigilantes is just not okay. It's look after your own nation. The world history is full of these kind of things, and the reality is that we're holding other nations to our moral standards. Installing a Western democracy in the Middle East just doesn't work. Their culture doesn't thrive under democracy, and we've taken thousands of years to get here from the Magna Carta. To expect that to happen in a generation over there is just wishful thinking. What they actually need to maintain peace and law and order and a civil society over there is a benevolent dictator, no matter how much we don't like it.
The other thing that seems to me here too is that the whole question of picking sides, and it's so there is no principled position here. Let's call it what it is.
Exactly.
It's not principled, because this whole idea I've seen people say, oh, but you've got to draw a line in the sand, and these are atrocities. And I get it. If you're using chemical weapons on innocent civilians, that's an atrocity. But by the way, so is any munitions being used on innocent civilians, whether they're chemical or not.
Yep.
And not only that, but what's going on in Yemen right now, where with Saudi Arabia and their military intervention, isn't that a nice sounding word, by the way, military intervention?
Yeah.
Right. So what's going on in Yemen with Saudi Arabia and this Saudi force that has been trained, armed and assisted by the United States? They have weaponized hunger and food. 50,000 children last year alone in Yemen died of starvation as a direct result, or the primary driver for this is the Saudi Arabian military intervention. Look at what Turkey and Erdogan, this is a president who just a couple of years ago tried to get the German government to take criminal action against a German person who made fun of him as president.
Wow.
Right? And the German government went as far as actually instigating that process. The guy had to lawyer up. This comedian had to lawyer up, apparently. Now, that's insane. So it seems to me that they really do pick their sides. And if you're going to say that, okay, let's say, 60 people is the claim that have been killed in this alleged attack.
Yep.
This latest alleged attack is enough to warrant that. Why the heck is 50,000 dead children from hunger that's been weaponized because of a blockade?
Yep.
Why is that not enough justification to do the same thing?
And not to throw too big a red herring in the conversation, but let's face it, America kills 1 million of their children every year deliberately in abortion clinics. They have no moral ground on which to lecture the rest of the world on how to run a civil society.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, eh? I guess the big question, just to wrap this little discussion up with, is this. Do you think it's going to hurt Trump's re-election chances?
No.
Not at all?
No, not at all. He's he's hit right the middle. This isn't 4D chess. This is just the least bad thing he could do. To appease the neocons, he had to do something to not raise the ire of the non-interventionists that he campaigned for. He has to do nothing serious. So he's done something, but it wasn't serious. So there'll be no change of regime in Syria at this stage. There'll be no World War III. ISIS will still be defeated, and he's placated everybody just enough. I think the famous saying is political success is making everybody just equally unhappy. I think everybody's the least unhappy they can be with what's gone on. So, he's probably done the most politically astute thing, even though it wasn't what I think he should have done in that situation.
It'd be interesting to see. For me, I think it depends how much that anti-interventionist base he's dependent on, because it seemed to me with Trump that what he relies on is several different groups. It's not like there's one large majority that put him into power. It's all these different groups, and they all came together to give him that majority. And if he loses more than one or two of them, he could be in real trouble. So
all he has to do to placate the non-interventionist, it has to be the balance of things. At the end of the day, political campaigns these days, I don't know about New Zealand, but Australia and America, it seems to be, I'm not as bad as the other guy. The other guy's worse. Who will you pay more taxes under? Well, we're not going to reduce taxes, but they'll make you pay more. That kind of campaign. All he has to do to keep the non-interventionists happy is withdraw from Syria in enough time before the next election. And so, he can have his cake and eat it too. A couple of surgical strikes and pull the troops out, and everybody's happy. I
think, to me, this is strike two. If there's a strike three, I'd say that he'd be in real trouble at that point.
Do you think they would then throw him out and go for Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton or somebody like that?
It depends who the other candidate is. I was thinking about this morning, and the question is, do you hate or are afraid of the other candidate enough to think they'd be worse? And if you do, then you're going to come out and vote against them, and so you vote for Trump. But I see this morning that in the last 12 hours or so, Joe Biden has given an interview, which is he's hinted again at the possibility that he might stick his hat in the race.
Fantastic.
Now, if that happens, that would be interesting, because there's plenty of material on him, and it would be an interesting debate between the two of them.
The Democrats haven't got anybody serious to put up as a candidate.
No, but what I think Joe Biden is he's probably, realistically, he would be their best of what they've got at this stage if they're not willing to actually get creative and look to the future.
Which is embarrassing for them.
Yeah, for sure.
Seriously, Joe Biden.
But what you'd have is these two. It'd be an interesting boxing match between the two of them.
Joe. I don't think that'd even be a competition. They'd be better off with Oprah.
Oh, don't laugh, because it may well come true. Okay, so moving right along to something perhaps a bit less controversial, but in actual fact it's not really that less controversial at all, and that is the Commonwealth Games. And the Commonwealth Games, for those who live outside the Commonwealth, America, are effectively our own localised version of the Olympics, just for countries that are in the British Commonwealth. And they've been happening, or they've just come to a close a couple of days ago in Australia, in your neck of the woods, in fact, in the Gold Coast. And we had a New Zealand athlete by the name of Laurel Hubbard. Laurel Hubbard is a biological male who now identifies as a woman, and he has been competing in female weightlifting, and went to the Commonwealth Games, competed against females, and several different nations raised concerns about this and said, hey, this is not fair. The response was, well, look, he's been taking these hormone therapies to make him more feminine with less testosterone for a couple of years now. The IOC, whoever the governing body is, has declared that he's within what their tolerances are supposed to be, and so we're all good. Now, Laurel got to the final stages of the weightlifting and then suffered a distended elbow, which is, as you're lifting, you basically pull your elbow. It's a pretty awful sort of injury. Wouldn't want that. Wouldn't wish that on your worst enemy. But in some ways, it was probably a saving grace, because there's no doubt that Laurel would have absolutely won gold, and it would have ignited a huge controversy, because the distance in kgs between him and the nearest competitors, it was sizable.
Yeah. Look, not a glorious day for New Zealand. When when our athletes are accused of ball tampering, the whole nation is incensed. But you guys, you send them over proudly to compete on the world stage in full knowledge. And
you've been waiting for how long to use that joke, mate? Come on, that's awful.
Yeah. Joke? What joke? So look, there's no doubt. The experts agree that if you train for your life as a man with all the equipment of a man, having even gender reassignment surgery and hormone replacements doesn't change the bodily benefits of the accumulated conditioning of a life of training. It just doesn't. You've got all the benefits of training for a lifetime of being a man. I don't think cheating is too strong a word. It's despicable. It's certainly unfair to all the female athletes. There's no way I'd be competing against him if he was just in the wrong category. It's against the spirit of sport. Sport is meant to be both fair and competitive. You're meant to be trying your best. It's not about equality. It's about being number one, number two, number three. It's meant to sort the men out from the boys. And, if you wanted equality, then do away with the discrimination of gendered competitions altogether. Or if you actually believe there's more than two genders, have more than two competitions. Here's the men's competition. Here's the women's competition. Here's the everything else competition.
Pick one of the Tumblr gender list. Yeah.
Here's the lunar sexual competition, or whatever those infinite competitions are. Like, if you're going to make up fantasies about reality, at least be consistent in how they're applied. I think there should just be one competition and everybody enters. I hate women's sport. How boring. Like, I don't want to watch women's cricket. That's just ridiculous. If you want to compete, then compete, play, go for it. Let the competition, let the women's AFL and rugby union and all these other things, just go for selection with all the boys and let the best players go for it. Are we after equality for women or not? Are we going to continue this myth that there's no difference between men and women? If so, compete with the boys. Go for the men's competition. Go for the leagues and all those things. Let's be consistent about it. Like, if you're a feminist and you believe in empowerment and equality, that's fantastic. But, we've seen this new trend that nobody wants to watch women's sport. Very few people. Like, TV's meant to be about ratings, not virtue signaling.
Well, I think it's interesting for me. I think what you have here really is the gender separation that we take in sport, particularly contact sport. It corresponds with reality. You can't have large male rugby players crunch tackling even the strongest of female players. I used to play social rugby. And we did, I remember one night at training.
I wouldn't want to be tackled by you.
Mate, I don't know if I wasn't that great, but, I was social. I was no All Black. But I remember one night we trained with the local social female team, and a couple of those girls, man, they could mix it up with the best of them. But to put them, the best of that, against the best of the social grade men, because of the size difference, the strength difference, there would have been very serious and real danger of harm being done to them. And the thing is that I think it's the same sort of reasoning why we don't let adults of any gender play against children and say, that's a level playing field. So there seems to be a recognition of reality here.
Because there needs to be discrimination.
Yeah, that's right. And we don't
let 13-year-olds play in the under-7s competition again, because discrimination is good for society.
Yeah.
There's right discrimination and there's obviously unjust discrimination.
Yeah, that's right.
But at the end of the day, people who say all discrimination is bad are just being so simplistic. It's not helpful to any conversation.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me because I kind of feel, on one hand, I feel for Laurel, because Laurel Hubbard then becomes the centre of this huge controversy. But at the same time, I'm also like, well, if you're going to put yourself at the centre of that, then I think you've got to actually accept that society has the right to have a rational, open discussion about whether or not this is legitimate.
Yeah, that's right. And there's a lot of discussion these days about whether or not an athlete's personal views should be, public conversation, or if they should be kept to themselves. Well, I'm sorry, if you put yourself up on the front stage, you invite that conversation to be public. Your private life and your professional life aren't separable.
Yeah.
You have to. You have every right to be who you are, and you have every right to be critiqued for who you are. You and I have that acceptance. You know, we get hung or praised by our own words. People either agree with us or disagree with us, and this is it. You make a statement when you participate as a transgender woman in a woman's competition, and it's obviously unfair. There's no reasonable person can say that's fair, but when you invite that conversation, and same as us, if somebody wants to say, I hate the look of your nose, Dave, I hate the sound of your voice, it's got to be water off a duck's back. You've got to choose that coming in. And if you're not ready for that criticism, if you're not ready for that conversation, if you're not ready for other people to be ugly towards you, then you're in the wrong game.
And can I just say here too, I don't believe for a second that Laurel has done this as some sort of competitive edge. I can't match it with the men, so I'll re-identify myself, and then I will compete against women, and I'll start winning, and yay for me.
Agreed.
I don't know of any athlete who possibly you'd say they've done that for that reason. But the bigger question is, irregardless of what their motivations are, there is a reality at play here. There is a scientific reality, there is a biological reality, and there is the impact of male-female competition is a reality that has to be considered over and above just your personal feelings and the way you have chosen to live your life, right?
Yep. Yeah, no, that's fair. I don't think there's a evidence of any character deficiency in Hubbard, but I think it would have been noble if he had have said, I'm going to compete against the men, even if I've got a disadvantage. I think that would have been the sportsman thing to do.
Well, it'd be interesting too. I think in some ways the governing bodies have failed here. The governing bodies clearly have just fallen to ideology. Yep. And so the governing bodies could have actually been that protective hedge around Hubbard to have prevented, so had a much smaller little conflict at the beginning to prevent Hubbard from then becoming this huge flashpoint of controversy.
So do you think they should have said, you're out? You're not able to compete?
I think they should have said, here's the scientific reality of it. Even if you adjust your the level of testosterone in your body, you've still had the advantage of training under that regime for most of your life. Yep. You still have other advantages. You have a different musculoskeletal system. You have, on average, men have bigger hearts. There's all these things that don't go away just because you've now lowered or decreased the testosterone in your system. And there's all sorts of big question marks about how lowering testosterone, what sort of impact or disadvantage, does it actually level the playing field or not? And when you look at some of the weights that Hubbard was lifting, there's a pretty big gap between Hubbard and the next competitor.
Yeah, and again, you're being incredibly biased if you don't even accept that as evidence. That she is not equal with the rest of the competition. There is no equality there. That's I think Aristotle or Plato? I think it might have been Aristotle who said the greatest form of inequality is to call things that are not equal.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because I think there are some who are now trying to make comparisons, say, with someone like Ian Thorpe, who was just this freak of swimming prowess, Australian again. Well done, you. And some people said, well, he seemed to have been gifted with physical differences that maybe gave him an advantage. But I would say in response, yes, but it's quite conceivable that sooner or later someone else will come along with those same sort of physical advantages, or maybe different ones, and we'll be able to match it or even beat him. So it's not really like an artificial imposition of something in that situation. It just happens to be a natural sort of freak of nature.
I hadn't heard that comparison, but that's a trash comparison. There's no equivalence there at all. It's biological birth, genetics. That is the lottery of life. And the thing about sport is it is meant to be adversary. It is the story of overcoming, of struggling, of defying all the odds and prevailing against all comers, both natural, environmental, and competitive. Your peers, your colleagues, those people it's the story of being number one, of being at the pinnacle, holding that gold or that trophy or your flag's nation aloft and saying, I did it. I'm the best. I'm better than everyone else. That is what you strive for. And it's the story of overcoming conflict and adversary. And, to do so any other way, or to try and make equality an outcome of that process is just like, what place does this have in sport? Good sportsmanship, absolutely. Good, playing on a level playing field, absolutely. But virtue signaling actually undoes those objectives of a level playing field.
Yeah, and I think too, at the end of the day, this comes back to a bigger philosophical problem in society. Just because you have a certain view about reality, it doesn't mean your view actually conforms to reality. You don't get to create your own reality. And this is where people who want to create their own view of reality are now starting to butt up against the cold, hard reality of what reality is and the limits of that,
Yeah, that's right.
Hey, moving on, last point of discussion. And interestingly, I wasn't actually going to talk about this, but Israel Folau, who is an Australian rugby league, now transferred to rugby player, pretty talented guy, from New Zealand originally, resides in Australia, plays the game there.
He's actually from my hometown, Logan.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Is that right? Well, there you go. And so he's made some comments about, he made some comments that were controversial in a Twitter feed. Can you just give us the background to the original controversy? And then
was it Twitter or Instagram?
Oh, sorry, you're right. It was Instagram. And then we'll talk about this opinion column that's been written in New Zealand in the last couple of days about it.
Yeah. So Israel Folau is a Mormon. He's well known for wearing his heart on his sleeve. He wears his faith. He's unashamed about it and uncompromising about it. And it wouldn't take much of a cynic to suspect that the post or the comment that he responded to was a bait, was a setup, trying to get him to say something confrontational. And the question was from a fan or a follower on Israel Folau's Instagram, what's God's will for gays? And Israel Folau's a footballer, not a theologian, not a politician. Not a diplomat, not even a pastor. He said, hell, in all caps, ... followed up by, unless someone repents from their sins and accepts Jesus Christ as their Lord and Saviour, that's what happens to everyone. Now, we can talk about how theologically accurate that is and how perhaps it might have been better phrased to convey probably what Israel actually meant. He's said on the record many times before that he loves everyone equally and he just wants the best for them, and he doesn't think anybody is less than him. So in the context of who Israel Folau is, it was just an honest answer to a direct question. However, we've seen a massive blow up of people saying, but feelings, what about their feelings? And, apparently it's a serious injury, a hate crime, a violence perpetrated on somebody else to suggest that a religion might disapprove of a behavior that they identify with. This shouldn't be remarkable, but it is certainly been loud. And there's been many calls. We've got a ridiculous commentator over here that we disaffectionately call Pirate Pete because he never ever takes off his silly bandana. If you're a fan of rugby, then you may know who I'm talking about. He doesn't mind forcing his opinion down everybody else's throats, but he doesn't think anybody who disagrees with him should have an opinion because their opinion is noxious and his opinion is approved. Storm in a teacup, really, but Israel has stood his ground. There's been a lot of people who've come out and said he has a right to say and think what he wants. It's
interesting to me. It seems too there is a bit of the Streisand effect going on here. Like this was a comment that was just chucked out on an Instagram feed to a question. He then quickly deleted the comment, from what I understand. But now
I haven't heard that.
Yeah, well, I don't think it took too long to delete it, but the comment was deleted. And now all of a sudden, though, far more people have been exposed to this comment simply because of the sort of viral outrage campaign. And I'm not convinced that that was necessarily the best way, even if you felt strongly against what he said, to respond to that, you know, strategically. It seems there are better ways. It seems this is one of those moments where you just go, okay, I don't agree with that. I think he was an idiot for saying it. I'm going to ignore him. Right? Isn't that seem like the more logical thing to do in that situation?
Or argue, and you know,
or say, here's why
everybody has exercised their freedom of speech.
Yeah.
Even the people who call for him to not be able to say that, are able to say that. They should be able to say that. Now, I disagree with that. I think that's a noxious thing to say. Yeah. But you have a right to say noxious things. Yeah. And so if you're able to say a noxious thing, what gives you the credibility of refusing somebody else?
Yeah, that's right.
You have the right to say a noxious thing. You have the right to say he shouldn't be allowed freedom of religion, freedom of speech, even if you don't use those words. You know, even if you say something stupid like get religion out of sport, then, okay, that's your right to say stupid things, just as it's his right to say what you might think are stupid things.
Yeah, and the thing for me is, and this is what we want to talk about today, is this article that's been published in the last couple of days in New Zealand. Our major newspaper, the New Zealand Herald, published an article by a sports commentator in which he's argued, well, what he said basically is part of a bigger problem in sport with all of these people and their personal religious beliefs. Why should I be subjected to them, for example, maybe pointing their fingers to heaven if they score a try or a touchdown? And why should they take a knee? And they should be banned from doing all of these things in the name of some sort of tolerance. My beliefs about religion should be imposed on your way of living life, which seems to me is far worse than simply saying, oh, yuck, I don't like that expression of your beliefs. Instead, you're saying, I want my beliefs about religion to be imposed on you and you shall be silenced.
Exactly. And this is from one of these characterized hate theists who aren't content to keep their opinions to themselves, but their opinion that everybody else's opinion should be kept to themselves is public. The hypocrisy in this article is just oozing out of every clause. It's full of self-contradiction and self-defeating arguments. His morals, his ethics, his values for a civil society, they're okay to be published, broadcast, and shoved down everybody's throat. And his qualification to tell us how to live our lives, he's a sports commentator. I mean, like, come on, give me a break. I mean, people are able to say what they want. If you're able to say it, Chris, then anybody's able to say it. I mean, bring your arguments and put a logical case, but don't tell me about your feelings, about how you're offended or uncomfortable when somebody points to heaven. And, like, for a start, get with the program. The majority of cultures around the world have every acceptance of some kind of spirituality one way or another. And, certainly all of Western tradition is founded on the notion that there is a higher power than government. There is a moral lawgiver to providence we give credit and attribution. So to even suggest that your views should be enforced on everybody else by keeping religion out of sport, it basically ignores the fact that you're in a very, very slim majority, both historically and globally. It's really, really authoritarian. And here's the rub that I have the major problem with. It's the authoritarianness. Like, the freedom to say stupid things is fundamental to the ability to find out what's intelligent. But we're talking about freedom. And the minute you start reducing or putting conditions on those freedom, you basically have no freedom. If you have the right to say anything you want, as long as it's what I agree with, it's what the majority agrees with, then you're basically creating tyrannies.
And it seems to me that's where the bigger issue lies here, is that tendency today, regardless of what the issue is, the first thing is, instead of actually engaging with even a stupid, what you might consider to be a stupid idea, and saying, well, here's why I think you're wrong, what we do is we say, right, how can I spin this, or how can I claim this as hate? And it doesn't take much these days. It seems if your feelings are hurt, that's an act of hate now. This is hate. You're a bigot, and you should be punished you should be silenced, and you should also issue a very public mea culpa and apologise. And this is where I think Israel Folau, regardless of what you think about his original comments, I actually admire the fact that he has stood his ground and continues to stand his ground and say, no, I'm not giving you an apology. And I actually admire someone who's willing to actually say, in a culture where we demand held these public inquisitions and we demand that people pass purity tests, and then if they don't, they must beg and scrape and wander through the town square naked, begging for mercy, then I'm actually, I like a guy who stands his ground, or a girl, and says, you know what, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to play that game.
Yep. No, it is. And what the leftistism of the new age is it's this new moralizing that basically takes us back to the Victorian era. Instead of moral virtue, actual moral virtue being put on people like chastity and patience and generosity and real moral virtues, we've got these false moral virtues being put on, and there's this politically correct puritanism that's actually in itself another expression of authoritarianism. I don't even like talking in expressions of left and right, because I think there's a lot of credibility to both positions. What I think we need to assess, whatever side we're coming from, is a more vertical spectrum instead of a left and right kind of axis. Let's talk about top and down. How big should the government's involvement in our everyday lives be? How big should the government be? How big should regulation be? How authoritarian or how free should our society be? And I would hope that most people agree with me. We should have freedom. We should have liberty. And the minute you start creating victim classes left, right, and centre that need government intervention to protect, then you're just making the government bigger and bigger and bigger, and you're ending up with a totalitarian, authoritarian regime not dissimilar to all of the socialist regimes that killed hundreds of millions of people in the last century.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting time for us and a real challenge about what is it, how are we going to live out the future of society if we can't even have a basic discussion about ideas, a robust and open discussion, without trying to silence those who disagree. And I think people on all sides are guilty of doing this at times. At the moment, a lot more on the progressive side, definitely. You're trying to silence people. But there are those on the right who too often cry, oh, this is not fair, this is a form of prejudice just because this person's making fun of me or saying things I disagree with. Look, this is one of the big things about my YouTube channel I'm quite passionate about is a free and open exchange of ideas, and also I'm okay with people who get on there, and even if they get a bit rowdy about things that I say and they don't like it, I'm okay with the actual debate happening. I think that's more beneficial than just silencing and punishing people for the way they say things just because I might disagree with them.
Yeah, look, and that's exactly right. I think it's, again, a distinctive, perhaps, I guess, right-wing people generally better disposed to liberty, to the opposite of authoritarianism, liberalism, if you like. That has a very mixed meaning on lots of different definitions. So let's not say liberalism, but freedom, liberty, libertarianism, if you like. And so, but if we can say, therefore we value freedom of speech, therefore we value a robust debate, therefore we invite people into our conversations and say, persuade me I'm wrong. Let's have a two-way conversation where you're listening as well. When I did that interview recently with the abortionist, it was confronting to have somebody who was so diametrically opposed to my values and my positions right in front of me. But it was valuable that there was one of the people from that side who was actually genuinely interested in a dialogue to promote her own ideas, just like I was, but at the same time listening. Yeah. And that's the important exercise I think we all need.
Here's what I think. I'm probably slightly in disagreement here. I don't know if it is a left-right thing when it comes to liberty and predisposing to it. I think for me it's about two things. A good sound philosophy. Do you have a good sound philosophy around the human person and basic freedoms and rights? And also, I think there's a maturity element too. I look back, say 20 years ago, I was a lot younger and engaged in some of these same issues. I was probably a lot less tolerant of opposing ideas. As you get a bit older, you sort of have that willingness to let ideas play out a bit, and you don't feel that you need to strongly stomp on people just because they disagree. And I think there's a sort of it doesn't necessarily an age thing, but there is a maturity of allowing ideas to sort of to boil away, if you like, and to be openly talked about, you know. And I think that the left and the right, if given different circumstances, could both become authoritarian if they're not careful in that regard.
Oh, absolutely. You know? Yeah, definitely. Authoritarianism, like it's probably hard to pin whether Hitler was left or right. He espoused lots of socialist rhetoric, and you know, he called his political party socialism. It could have been pragmatic, but you know, he was also very, very, very authoritarian. And you know, he's probably the best example of authoritarianism on the right. Certainly, the left think he was a complete right wing. You know, ideologue, but you know, this authoritarianism is definitely a propensity of both left and right. I don't disagree with you there. Maybe it's just a modern phenomenon that we're seeing from leftists, especially Hollywood and mainstream media, that the idea of censoring people who disagree with us seems to be coming mostly from the left. I don't see many people on the right suggesting that we should shut down the conversation if it's not going our way.
And I think part of that too, I sense that part of that is that they realise that there is a threat to them here, because you don't shut down a conversation unless you see the conversation as a threat, because too many people are actually being swayed by it or are invested in that idea you don't like. If no one bought into it, everyone thought it was a joke, you'd say, yeah, don't worry about it, you know. So it's interesting times ahead. Moral of the story, to wrap things up, make sure you listen to people, give them a fair hearing, listen to what they're saying, and actually engage with ideas. Don't look for the victimization card. Don't look for accusations of hate. Listen and engage with the idea, and then pull it to parts and pull it to bits in a robust way.
And to use the rugby term, play the man, not the ball.
That's right. Don't play the man on the ground with your sprigs, all right? Okay. So with that, I think that brings an end to our conversation today. Dave, it was awesome to have you with us here today on Left Foot Media to be able to talk about these things. Pellowe Talk, how do we access your content? How do we find you?
PellowTalk.com is a nice and easy way. Don't forget there's an E on the end of Pellowe. That's my mugshot. Sorry, boom, boom. So...
oh, mate, I'll do the jokes, mate.
Yeah, well, hey, I don't have as many kids as you, but I am qualified for dad jokes.
Yeah, classic.
So, yeah, Dave Pellowe is the social media channel. Yeah. So, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Instagram's not very active, but I can show you photos of my fruit trees. Yeah, all those social media channels, it's /Dave Pellowe. And davepellowe.com as well.
Dave, it was great to have you on. Guys,
thanks, Brendan. It's been so much fun.
No, it was good. And to my audience who are watching this, if you like it, don't forget to leave a like and let us know in the comment section below. Did you agree? Did you disagree? If you want to see more of these, because Dave and I would like to have more regular chats, if you'd like to see more of these across the ditch conversations, then please let us know in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. See you next time on Left Foot Media.